Alone in the Dark 2. Our story starts on December 22nd, 1924. Yay, Christmas game. It's 3 months after the events of Alone in the Dark, and the kidnapping of a young girl, Grace Saunders, is being investigated by supernatural private eye Edward Carnby and his partner, Ted Straker. A trail of clues has led to an old mansion named Hell's Kitchen, the property of an infamous gangster boss and his gang. Ted Straker sneaks past the building security and into the second-story bedroom. In this creepy room, Ted finds Grace Saunders lying in a bed. She is happy to see him, but that doll in the corner? It's no doll at all! Boo. The clown murders him before disappearing in a plume of smoke. Ted's lifeless body is approached by a mysterious woman, Elizabeth, but you don't know that yet. Straker was able to send a telegram to Edward Carnby before his death, reading, "Hell's Kitchen is cursed. Grace Saunders has been kidnapped by One-Eyed Jack. Help me." 2 days later, Edward picks up on Ted's trail and infiltrates Hell's Kitchen by blowing open the front gate. Don't look at explosions. Edward fights his way through the creepy garden maze, killing off guards and ghouls. He finds an old picture of a gang in front of an ornate garden statue. Edward finds his way to the same statue in the picture, and opens it up by moving the statue's arm. The secret entrance leads to an underground labyrinth. Edward promptly falls down the ladder to find the dead body of his partner, Ted Straker.
Carnby, if you read this, it means I am dead. The Saunders child was kidnapped by One-Eyed Jack. That man is a monster, obsessed with gambling and death. I can also tell you that the gang makes whiskey in the cellar and transports it by boat at high tide from a cave.
Edward swears to avenge his friend's death and find Grace Saunders. Exploring the caves further, Edward finds the whiskey cellars. To make his way through the cellars, Edward solves card-themed puzzles and spanks a few guards. Edward finds his way into the Hell's Kitchen mansion. He's also dressed as Santa for theme. Through a series of puzzles and fights, Edward kills the murderer of Ted Straker, the clown thing, by luring it into a den of snakes that happens to be chilling out in one of the mansion's many rooms. After brawling through the mansion with henchmen and ghouls, Edward is lured and trapped in a cage, face to face with One-Eyed Jack himself. Also, Grace is there too, who's just hanging out on the bed. One-Eyed Jack has been waiting for Edward to show, and tells him of his backstory as pirate captain of the Flying Dutchman. On Christmas Eve of 1724, One-Eyed Jack and his crew brutally slaughtered the original crew of the Flying Dutchman, allowing him to take the ship as his own. Jack makes the Flying Dutchman's original captain, Captain Nicholas, walk the plank. Before his death, Captain Nicholas sticks his sword in the middle of the deck and curses One-Eyed Jack to die by it. Jack's crew were all disappointed with the lack of treasure on their newfound ship, but in the cargo was something that Jack knew to be the finest treasure of them all. A big boob lady. Her name is Elizabeth, and Jack immediately simps. Elizabeth made Jack and his crew sign a mysterious contract, giving them all immortality. The Flying Dutchman and its crew went on to become infamous around the world. In 1824, the Flying Dutchman and its crew hid in a cave under a cliff that collapsed on the ship, trapping it underground. The cliff is now what Hell's Kitchen stands on. Makes sense. Since then, One-Eyed Jack and his crew have been reigning over Hell's Kitchen with a cursed fist. While One-Eyed Jack goes on this expositional tangent, Grace just walks out of the room and escapes. Jack goes to find her, leaving Edward time to break out of his cage. While escaping, Edward runs into Elizabeth, who uses voodoo powers to stop and capture Edward. Grace hides, and Elizabeth and Jack take the voodoo-imprisoned Edward underground to the Flying Dutchman. Grace sneaks around the guards and commits Grand Theft Auto in a bid to escape, but she's soon captured again, because she's terrible. Both imprisoned in the bowels of the underground Flying Dutchman, it's now Elizabeth's turn to deliver exposition. 200 years ago, Elizabeth arrives in Haiti, intended to be tutored by the contemptuous Cotton. Cotton's Haitian slave taught Elizabeth how to ride the shadows and the art of the voodoo. Elizabeth murders Cotton, and then she's taken prisoner on the Flying Dutchman for her crime. Using her voodoo powers, Elizabeth's spirit leads Jack to the Flying Dutchman, and then Jack will break her free. Elizabeth then uses her powers again to make Jack and his crew immortal. as long as every 100 years they sacrifice a girl in her youth. And this year, it's Grace's turn. Edward is still in shackles, so it's up to Grace to find a way out. Grace does, and she's able to sneak around the crew because they're all busy dancing.
Sparks fly.
Grace makes her way up to the mansion where she finds a passage in a book with information about the only thing that can overcome the power of the voodoo. A chicken foot. With this new information, Grace makes her way back to the Flying Dutchman's kitchen to retrieve the legendary chicken foot. Of course, the moment she steps foot on the Flying Dutchman, she gets captured. Edward is able to free himself now, fights off the ghouls, and Grace just sort of walks away again. Edward fights his way through the crew members until he comes face to face with Elizabeth's voodoo once more. All hope looks lost for Edward. Oh no, until Grace just kind of walks in again and waves a chicken leg in front of Elizabeth, consequently killing her and freeing Edward. Then Grace goes to wait on a rowboat, and Edward shuffles his slow ass over there. The death of Elizabeth makes the structure of the entire cave unsteady, and it could fall and crush them at any second. But luckily, Edward fights off the rest of the remaining crew with a showdown with One-Eyed Jack, killing him with Captain Nicholas's sword. In the last moments before the cave collapses, Edward and Grace are able to make it out on a rowboat. The game ends with Edward and Grace rowing to safety, and Grace is just flipping everyone off, it looks like.